9,000 pounds death knell. Striking the enemy's death knell with every shot. I like this name. Klein controlled his facial expressions as he went forward without any anticipation or excitement on his face. He reached out to receive the iron-black revolver with a slightly long barrel. He was originally very worried that Ukfa would raise the price if he showed any strong desires for it. This was common in any transaction, but on second thought, with J.M. Sparrow's reputation, and with Anderson, the strongest hunter of the Fog Sea, as a witness, it was unlikely that Ukfa Canerchus would offend him despite possibly being a Sequence 5 Beyond. After all, he had quite the adventuring circles, and had hoped to lead a quiet and settled life. He definitely had reservations that the crazy adventurer might sneak into the manor in the middle of the night despite not flaring up in front of him. Therefore, his attempts to maintain his calm and composed attitude became one of simply maintaining his persona. Realizing that J.M. Sparrow was seriously inspecting and studying Death Knell, Ukfa gave a detailed introduction. Its powers are rather uniform, to reap the lives of others. There are 3 methods. First is weakness attack. There's no need to meet any conditions. Just directly inject your spirituality and pull the trigger. It will allow you to discover the target's weaknesses from a mysticism angle. In other words, it would be the aspects where defenses are weaker, and it will provide you with the corresponding accuracy, thus resulting in extraordinarily terrifying damage. The second is lethal attack. You have to cock the hammer before shooting. Its distinguishing feature is that wherever you hit the target, it will be equivalent to an attack on their weak spot. And if you really do strike the true weak spot, it will be capable of dealing a lethal blow to an enemy without overly strong defenses. The targets who are good at defending, 3 shots would be able to resolve the matter. This includes Guardian. Of course, that is under the premise that the 3 lethal blows aren't spread too far apart. It's best not to exceed 5 seconds. The third is slaughtering. On the foundation of a weakness attack, providing more than twice the spirituality on top of that will imbue ordinary bullets with grapeshot effects. Simultaneously, when aimed at a group of enemies, it will result in area of effect damage. To increase the damage, it will need to meet the conditions for lethal attack, as well as provide more than thrice the spirituality. This drain will be quite a burden on the user. It can also be combined with bullets with different characteristics, allowing you to target different kinds of enemy. This sounds like it corresponds to Sequence 5 Reaper of the Hunter pathway. Klein glanced at Anderson and asked, seemingly in thought, if the target's physical condition reaches that of a Sequence 4 Dragon, how many strikes of lethal attack will kill it? Ukfa was taken aback as he shook his head in a daze. I've never met a dragon before, much less a dragon whose physical condition has reached that of a demigod. Does J.M. Sparrow plan on using this gun to slay dragon? And a demigod dragon at that? Isn't that way too crazy? Ukfa suddenly felt that the adventurers these days were completely different from the ones he met back when he was active. He didn't even consider the possibility of death. Anderson coughed before clearing his throat. That will depend on your luck. For real, trust me, luck is extremely important. If you encounter a dragon that has been beaten to a state close to death, then 1 shot would be sufficient. Otherwise, I suggest you to run. Yes, it's more important to stay alive. Of course, if the demigod dragon doesn't defend and stays there for you hit it, 5 shots of lethal attacks should be enough to kill it. Ukfa looked at Anderson before looking at J.M. Sparrow. He decided not to pursue the topic as he changed topic. Anderson has told you about the negative effects of Death Knell, right? You will receive a weakness that originally didn't exist, or it will enhance an already existing weakness, making it become more extreme. This effect will be maintained for 6 hours. There was once a time when I became extremely afraid of cats. There was one when I had just hunted a famous pirate, but I ended up going limp in the legs in front of a newborn kitten. I knelt before it, wailing and crying for it to spare me. If you carry it around, the problems aren't great. It will only make you easily thirsty. Just drinking more water and heading to the washroom more often would solve the problem. Why does it feel like the negative effects of an additional weakness will bring me more trouble? However, it is something acceptable. Klein deliberated and said, name your price. 9,000 pounds. Anderson should have mentioned it. That's my bottom line. Ukfa looked at Death Knell in J.M. Sparrow's hands and said, this is already cheap enough. If it wasn't because I was worried that getting to know more Beyonders would affect my present life, I would have actively promoted it. I'm sure I can sell it for 12,000 pounds. Indeed, a mystical item at this level can be sold for sky-high prices if the negative effects aren't too serious when meeting a suitable buyer. Normally speaking, 10,000 to 12,000 pounds is a reasonable price. Although Klein had the intention of bargaining, the price was already low enough that he felt embarrassed to try and take advantage of it. With a terse acknowledgement, he said, "I'll give it a run. I'll complete the deal if there aren't any problems." Of course, he didn't really try the gun, as it would give him a weakness for nothing. His method for inspection was to use his spirituality to probe the gun, along with testing for the credibility of Ukfa's words via divination. He did it rather openly, without minding Ukfa's and Anderson's gazes. "I'll make confirmation later above the gray fog, however. Ukfa likely doesn't dare to lie to me. He's definitely afraid of a crazy adventurer seeking revenge on him. After all, he has already obtained a settled and quiet life. He has a wife and children." Klein placed death knell on the table, lifted his suitcase, and took out 9,000 pounds from it. The money had been removed from above the gray fog to air it ahead of time. After Ukfa received the money, he did a quick count and confirmed the authenticity of the money. As expected of a recently famous adventurer, few people can produce 9,000 pounds in cash at once. "Even a tycoon doesn't have that much liquidity," he said poignantly as he put away the stacks of cash. "I even spent 5,000 pounds to buy a key not long ago." Klein felt his heart suddenly turn empty as he saw the 9,000 pounds in her Ukfa's drawer. "I've been out at sea for so long, saving up so much money, but in just moments it's all gone now. I'm left with 2,683 pounds and 6 gold coins. I can't even afford a relatively decent manor." Klein sighed as he took out the ordinary revolver from his underarm holster, removed the bullets inside, and stuffed them into death knell. After Anderson watched the entire transaction, he said with a tusk, "Ukfa, you've changed. In the past, you would have checked the authenticity of each note. If you find it troublesome, I can help you. It's totally fine, but I'm worried that Jamin will shoot you." Ukfa clearly knew the strongest hunter's talent at provocation. He could imagine the scene of Anderson posing in a way that was begging to be beaten, counting each and every note while verifying them against the light in slow motion. "Well said." Klein silently praised him. He then stuffed the iron black, long-barreled revolver into his underarm holster. The original revolver was thrown inside the suitcase. "Thanks to you, I no longer have to fret over this matter," Ukfa said with a smile as he pointed at the door. "I'll get my valet to send you out." Anderson opened his mouth as he chuckled. "Ukfa, aren't you going to keep us here for dinner? When you are married with kids, I'll treat you to the best food at the best restaurant," Ukfa said with a smile, completely unfazed by his accusation. Out of the manor, Anderson looked up with squinted eyes. At the sight of the setting sun, he chuckled. "Back when I knew Ukfa, he was a doctor who was good at planting all kinds of strange plants on the ship to improve everyone's life. I thought he would die early on during our adventures, but to my surprise, he was always lucky. He even became a druid later." "Why are your poignant words also so deserving of a beating?" Klein deliberately said. "He does have good luck. As your companion, luck is needed to survive." Anderson turned his head in surprise as he scrutinized Jamin Sparrow. "You know how to mock others. Or have you been infected by me?" He wasn't too affected by it as he straightened his clothes, took off his hat and said with a smile, "All right, you've gotten the mystical item you need. If there's nothing else, it's time I embark on my own journey. Don't forget that demigod's mission." Klein succeeded in using a single sentence to crumple Anderson's expression. "I already have an urge that compels me to finish that matter as soon as possible. All right, there's no need for goodbyes. Perhaps we might really meet again one day." Anderson gave a self-deprecating laugh, waved the hat in his hand, and turned to head towards another path that left to Bayham. As he watched the strongest hunter depart, Klein slowly heaved a sigh. Holding his suitcase, he followed the path he took to get here and headed for Bayham under the red evening sky and the shelter of unique palm trees. Inside Bayham City, after finding an ordinary inn to stay in, Klein began considering his subsequent plan. "I'm finally free. I can attempt to act as a marionist. I have to figure out the corresponding principles. That's the most pressing issue for now. Yes, marionist. The focus should be on the marionette. I haven't actually created a marionette and controlled it in battle. I should start from there. This matter can be completed before returning to backline. Not only do Beyonders have to stay hidden there, making it difficult to encounter one, but no matter what one does, it's easy to get on the bad side of the church or some important figure. I need to be careful. It's not a good place to select and create marionettes. The sea is better. I'll go make my rounds at the bar later. I'll find a pirate who deserves death to give it a try. With this in mind, Klein immediately got up and left his room. As though he was bringing his certificate of deposit to a bank to withdraw the money, he headed for the nearby seaweed bar. Famous pirates often showed up there. Soon he arrived at the bar's entrance. After straightening his clothes, he pushed open the heavy wooden door. Gazes subconsciously swept past his face before they moved away, as though it wasn't anything extraordinary. Following that, someone shouted with a suppressed voice, "J.M. Sparrow." In a blink of an eye, several figures in the bar ran for the back door. Before Klein could figure out what was happening, the bar was left relatively desolate and empty. As Klein looked at the bar, which was so silent that he could hear breathing, he was taken aback. Only then did he step in and walk straight to the bar counter, as though nothing had happened. I should change my appearance the next time I come, he thought in frustration, just short of facepalming. Ukfa's lack of awareness that J.M. Sparrow had successfully hunted Slaughter Kirches had made Klein believe that the latest news hadn't reached the city of generosity, and he boldly came to the seaweed bar. To his surprise, the problem lay in Ukfa, who had kept a distance from the adventurer circle. He was a little behind on the news, and the crazy adventurer's infamy had already spread amongst the pirates around the Rorsted archipelago. Sighing silently, Klein sat in front of the bar counter and rapped the wooden counter. 1 glass of Southville beer. 6 pence. The bartender gulped his saliva with great difficulty. Klein took out a few copper pence and placed it in front of him. Without a change in expression, he asked, "Any developments recently?" The bartender took the money and carefully delivered the beer to J.M. Sparrow. Then he forced a smile and said, "Admiral Amirius Revolt has been transferred back to Back. Admiral Robert Davis has replaced him, becoming the highest-ranking naval commander of the surrounding waters for the kingdom. The archipelago's situation is a little tense, and many pirate crews have sent people to gather intelligence. Admiral Amirius was ultimately implicated by his brother and lost his post. However, as long as he wasn't directly involved, it can't get worse for him when considering his status as a demigod. At the very least, he can maintain the treatment he receives as an admiral. Nothing will happen to his family either. Once the matter blows over, he might still have a chance of being a high-ranking member of the Navy." Klein gulped down the beer and asked in passing, "Which family is Robert Davis from?" "No, he's not a noble. He's one of the rare officers who slowly rose up the ranks to admiral. In the Berserk Sea, Sonia Island, and East Balam, he has rendered plenty of meritorious services." The bartender recalled the commendations the papers recently had for Admiral Robert Davis. After a pause, he said, "However, I heard that he has received the sponsorship of many nobles. Yes, with the Imperial Navy, admirals who are from the royal family or aristocrats, or have close ties with them, take up at least 80%. The remaining 20% are mainly rear admirals and vice admirals." Klein had long learned of the situation from the documents he received from Amirius Revolt. Compared to this, the army was a lot better. J.M. Sparrow didn't continue asking, as he seemed to focus on his drinking. The bartender then added, "In the past 2 to 3 months, the resistance has been very active. They've been constantly attempting to destroy railways or set up blockades on public roads. They've given the Governor General's office quite a headache, forcing it to dispatch large numbers of soldiers to maintain a smooth flow of traffic. However, the resistance army seldom clashes with them head-on. I'm aware of that. It's all going according to my plans. In a place where the natives and mixed bloods take up 80%, it's not difficult for the resistance to gather accurate intelligence. Coupled with external sponsors, it wouldn't be hard for them to live on for short periods of time. The reason why they were in a dire situation in the past was all because Calvatua was an irrational sea serpent. It often got them to attack key nodes in a city, fighting head-on with the Lone Kingdom's navy and army." Klein mumbled to himself in delight as he drank another mouthful of beer. He had also warned the resistance to not be overly active. If they forced the Governor General's office into a corner, the Lone Kingdom might send Sequence 5 Beyonders or even demigods who were good at pursuit and tracking. With the resistance's strength, there was no way they could put up a fight. In the name of Sea God, Klein's instructions were to maintain while slightly improving their present situation and await for the global situation to change. This wasn't too far off. According to the various matters Miss Justice had feedback on, and with the Hanged Man giving insight that affirmed this, it was certain that once the Lone Kingdom was done with its internal reforms and making the original and newly added ironclad warship become its main force in combat, a war against the southern continent's colonies was inevitable. He silently drank his beer until the bartender was done. He then wore his hat, got up and left the bar, heading straight for his inn. Along the way, he saw bronze-skinned children with curly hair and natives with brown jackets and pantaloons. These people either made way in horror without even looking up, or they were hunched in a corner, looking at Klein with a complicated look in their eyes. Klein helplessly curved the ends of his lips as he silently returned to his room. He didn't immediately change his appearance and head to the various bars to seek out pirates. This was because he was certain that they would hide the entire night and not appear again. Just as Klein was planning to enter Grossel's travels to explore it, there was a knock on his door. Without needing to ask, all he did was grip the knob when the visitor's appearance naturally surfaced in his mind. It was a middle-aged man, dressed in a dark red coat and white slacks. He wore a ship-shaped hat. The corners of his eyes and mouth, as well as his forehead, had clear wrinkles. He was none other than the captain of the White Agate, military personnel, just Elland. Impressive. News of me appearing in Bayam just spread, and he managed to find where I'm staying, of course. It's because I didn't attempt to hide myself. I directly used my identification documents to check in. Klein turned the knob and pulled open the door. He politely greeted him, "Good evening." "Good evening. I'm very glad to see you back in Bayam." Ellen took off his hat and entered the room without any reservation. "T.S. there's something." Klein pulled a chair over and sat down. Ellen sat opposite him and chuckled. "T isn't visiting a friend, the most important matter." "You are such a smooth talker. Too bad Anderson is gone, or he can learn from you." Klein felt triggered for some reason. He maintained his usual state and looked into Ellen's eye. "All right, you've made your visit." Ellen seemed to have expected such a response. He smiled and said, "Do you still remember Donna?" "Of course, she and her brother are adorable. I wonder if they've recovered from the fright I gave them the last time and have given up any curiosity towards the mysterious world." Klein calmly replied, "I don't have amnesia. Forgetting unimportant matters aids our mental health." "Heh, this isn't said by Emperor Roselle." Ellen simply explained, "Didn't you tell Donna's father that he should post in the Sonya Morning Post for 3 days in a row, asking to buy Damir's special cured meat if he needs your help? He did so recently, but unfortunately, you weren't in Bayam or the nearby sea." "What happened after that?" Klein's instincts told him that Donna and her family weren't in serious trouble based on Ellen's relaxed attitude. Ellen chuckled and said, "I heard your conversation back then, and after discovering I visited them using the address. As you know, Donna is a lovely lady. She reminds me of my daughter. The matter isn't too complicated. Erdy, who's Donna's father, had a bunch of valuable goods plundered by the crazy captain. This plunged him into a terrible economic situation. Although it isn't as bad as going bankrupt, life for him has definitely turned for the worse. That's why he wishes to commission you to get the goods back. He knew you weren't in Bayam back then, so I had to go through my own channels to help Erdy recoup the goods at a reasonable price." Crazy Captain. Klein first found the title familiar before recalling where he had heard it before. According to red-haired Helling, Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's delivery of slaves for the Demoness sect was passed off to Crazy Captain Connors Victor. The latter appeared to have close connection with many of the slave dealers and merchants in the Lone Kingdom. And this was tied to the truth behind the human disappearances in the colonies, as well as the underlying reason of the Great Smog of Backland. I've always been trying to investigate this matter. Back when I attacked Tracy, that was half the reason, but unfortunately I didn't succeed. Later, I was busy acting for the digesting of the potion and my search for mermaids, so I temporarily abandoned my investigations." Klein's thoughts raced as he asked without a perturbed look, "Where's Crazy Captain now?" "Erdy has already gotten back his goods," Ellen hissed, emphasizing that the matter had been settled. Klein looked at him and repeated, "Where's Connors Victor now?" Ellen shook his head in exasperation. "T have no idea, but his subordinates are still in Bayam trying to gather intelligence. As you know, Admiral Amirius has returned to Backland, and he's been replaced by Admiral Davis. Many changes are in place, so the pirates need to have a new handle of the latest situation. Therefore, I guess that Connors' ship is docked in the shadows of one of the nearby islands, but that's a guess with no way to confirm. After listening in silence with his hands clasped, Klein said, "Thank you." Elend exhaled and looked out the window as his expression rapidly turned solemn. "He came here today to tell you that you're too eye-catching. The higher-ups are beginning to pay attention to you. A powerhouse that can easily kill Kirches wouldn't be ignored. It's best you stop using this identity for checking in, otherwise, you might face some difficult problem." Klein nodded seriously and said, "All right." He was very grateful for Captain Ellen's warning, but he didn't show it on his face. After Ellen left, Klein immediately changed his appearance, switched ins, and confirmed that he wasn't tracked by the military. After doing all of that, he began considering the search for crazy Captain Connors Victor. To others, this was an extremely difficult task, but Klein had a trick up his sleeve. It was to use the Sea God Scepter and communicate with nearby sea creatures. As long as Connors Victor was in the Rorsted Archipelago's waters, there was no way he could hide from Klein. Of course, it was necessary that he had enough time to perform the search. Above the gray fog, Klein extended his hand and summoned the Sea God Scepter from the junk pile. He began browsing through the countless points of light swirling about the sealed artifact. Every point of light corresponded to a believer's prayer. The glows swirled with ethereal holiness. Soon, Klein did a preliminary screening as he focused on the waters instead of the archipelago. After he had isolated the Sea God Scepter above the gray fog, he was unable to directly use the divine artifact to sense the surrounding waters and do anything effective. He had to rely on the scenes of his believers' prayers as a foundation before reaching out 5 nautical miles to influence the corresponding undersea creature. Klein emanated his spirituality and touched one of the specks of light. He saw a native performing his daily prayers in the evening on a fishing boat before docking. As Klein's thoughts changed, the angle of the scene quickly drew higher as more dark clouds and undulating waves appeared in the scene. There are signs of a storm brewing hours ahead. That's right. I did find the atmosphere repressing when I was out. That's why Ellen said that crazy Captain Connors' ship is likely to be hiding in the shadows of some island. It was to avoid the storm. Klein tapped the edge of the model table as he muttered silently. Having deduced this, it made his search much easier. This was because he didn't need to search the extensive waters. All he needed to do was focus on the different islands around those waters. With a change in thought, a blue gem at the tip of the Sea God Scepter in Klein's hand lit up. On the waters which no longer had the fishing boat, the crimson moonlight shone down on the deep blue waves that were slowly rising. Suddenly, splashes silently surged upwards as an exaggerated eye looking up into the sky surface. Beneath the eye was a massive silhouette. At the same time, all kinds of fish began surfacing nearby. They took in the indistinct halo that came scattering down, and they circled around before swimming down and headed in different directions. 10 seconds later, the waters in a 5 nautical mile radius returned to its previous state. The deep blue waves rose up to high height again, awaiting the final eruption. Phew, this is a little draining. Klein raised his left hand to rub his temple. He wasn't only simply commandeering the sea creatures, he had also bestowed them with remnant Beyonder spirituality to a certain degree. It allowed them to transmit the scenes they saw by praying after they discovered any dock ships around the island. This wasn't too difficult or complicated for the Sea God Scepter, but it was burdensome and draining for the controller, Klein. Then, Klein selected a few praying believers situated on different islands around the archipelago. He then used the same method to command the sea creatures of the region. After doing all of this, he didn't bother throwing the Sea God Scepter into the junk pile before returning to the real world. He took off his coat and collapsed into bed. Having expended his spirituality to the limit, he believed that he would fall asleep immediately. Yet his head began aching, preventing him from opening his eyes or falling asleep. Klein could clearly feel that his skin seemed overly sensitive. Lumps grew over his skin, and hidden beneath them were countless meat tendrils. Indeed, as Mr. Hanged Man said, if you drain your spirituality to 0 for 2 consecutive days, you'll definitely start hearing things and show signs of losing control. My body became a little abnormal just from reaching my limits once despite not even maintaining it for too long. Of course, it's because I've only recently advanced, and I haven't digested much. Furthermore, there's the excess from the potions from the prior sequences. Klein regained his train of thought as he attempted to cogitate the stacked spherical lights so as to calm the fatigue of his body and mind. Having gradually recovered, he finally fell asleep. By the time he woke up, it was in the middle of the night. At that moment, the winds were howling outside. The rain was pouring as the storm had finally unleashed its might after a prolonged period of brewing. And this wasn't a rare situation in Bayan. Apart from that, the night was relatively serene. Klein went to the washroom to clear his bowel. Washing his hands and taking 4 steps counterclockwise, he once again appeared above the gray fog. He picked up the sea god scepter on the end of the long bronze table and began browsing through the scenes from the sea creature. The scenes were that of ships, all located at different ports, harbors, or the shadows of different islands. Although Klein hadn't seen crazy Captain Connor's Victor, he had previously learned of his traits and the various emblems of his pirate crew. Therefore, he wasn't afraid of failing to identify him. Scenes flashed past as he patiently scrutinized the details of the ship. About 10 minutes later, a look of unconcealed joy appeared in his eye. He zoomed in on a scene as he pulled the orientation of the scene closer. He had found the suspected ship. The ship was docked at the back of Samim Island, an island furthest from the Rorsted archipelago. Behind it was a towering cliff with churning waves below it. Its sails and flag had been reefed up, but there was a white skull emblem with an eye patch on the 2 sides of the ship. This was none other than the emblem of the crazy captain's pirate crew. Klein removed the spirit pendulum from his left wrist and made a confirmation with divination. The answer made him rejoice, as it was indeed Connor's Victor's ship. And crazy captain only had 1 ship. It's no wonder that despite most adventurers at sea knowing that crazy captain is in contact with the kingdom's human traffickers and slave merchants, the Church of Storms' investigations of the colony disappearances didn't point to him. He only has a bounty of 3,300 pounds. The pirate crew only has 1 ship, so it just looks like it's a small business. It's impossible for him to do large-scale human trafficking. What should I do next? Klein first sighed silently before considering his angle of investigation. His first reaction was to summon a massive undersea creature, hitch a ride on something akin to a whale, and head straight for Samim Island while the storm continued. Then he could infiltrate and use his powers as a marionette to control crazy Captain Connor's Victor without causing too much of a stir. But on careful thought, he felt that it was a rash decision. It wasn't a problem dealing with other pirates who weren't at the pirate admiral level, but since crazy Captain Connor's Victor was involved with a terrifying matter like the Great Smog of Backland, he had to consider that Connor's normal actions were just a disguise. In consideration of how he might have another identity, with the ship concealing some secrets, there was a high chance that there was a trap that could deal with Pirate Admiral. Klein might not walk out alive despite being armed to the teeth if he made such a rash infiltration attempt. Should I summon myself and head over with the Sea God Scepter as a spirit body? This can avoid some accidents, as I can immediately end the summoning if anything goes wrong. However, the Sea God Scepter is essentially the Beyonder characteristic of a high-sequence Beyonder from the Storm pathway. As long as it appears in the real world, it might attract Sea King John Cotman. This will prevent the situation from developing as I expect it to. Klein looked at the storm in the scene as he came up with a preliminary plan. Before that, he conjured a pen and paper and wrote the divination statement. Dealing with Connor's Victor is very dangerous. Picking up the silver chain of the spirit pendulum, Klein reined in his thoughts and focused on the divination. Soon, he opened his eyes to see the topaz pendant turning clockwise at a high frequency and large amplitude. This meant that dealing with Connor's Victor was very dangerous. It's as I expected. Thankfully, I didn't rashly rush over. Klein picked up the Sea God Scepter and decided on executing the plan he had just thought of. It was to use the prayer scene and strike Connor's Victor's ship with the Sea God Scepter from afar by using the cover of the storm. He would rouse the nest and force out its secret. After grasping the relevant situation, he would end the attacks before Sea King John Cotman sensed the abnormality or arrived at the scene. Klein wouldn't feel disappointed if Connor's Victor unfortunately landed in the hands of the Sea King. This was because he would have to think of the means to pass the information to the 3 churches after he figured out the truth of the Great Smog of Backland. If Crazy Captain successfully escaped, Klein would have pried into his secrets by rousing the nest. He could then subsequently formulate a plan of attack. Phew, Klein slowly exhaled as he watched the ship bob about with the dark crashing waves before raising the sea god scepter high in the air. At the tip of the scepter, the blue gems that circled around it had begun to emit a bright light. Samim Island. Under the towering cliff, dark sea waters were being roused by the surrounding waves as they churned about considerably. On crazy Captain Connor's Victor's ship named the Single-Eyed Skull, a few pirates donned cloaks as they pulled up their hats. The rain pattered down heavily on them as they fought against winds that could lift a child, in order to walk out the cabin and inspect the ship to prevent any accidents from happening. Their cloaks were made of linen, but their surfaces were smeared with an already hardened sticky liquid. The raindrops were unable to permeate through that layer and could only flow down onto the deck. The liquid was Donningsman tree sap, produced from the southern continent's rainforest. It was naturally water-resistant and was quite commonly seen. It was originally rather cheap, but after a research team last year suspected that it had beneficial effects on hair growth, its price skyrocketed. In such weather it's suitable to be inside the Red Theater, drinking liquor, smoking weed, and having women in your arms. A pirate looked out of the shipboard and grumbled. His companion echoed him as he pulled at his cloak's hood. I heard there's a bunch of new arrivals at the Red Theater. I really want to give them a try. How did you learn of that? Another pirate asked in passing. He was met with a chuckle. T heard it from the boss. It's not like you have no idea what Captain's business is. That's why the boss knows plenty of human traffickers. Huh? They prefer to be called slave merchants. Speaking of which, I recall what happened that time. The pirate who spoke at the beginning wore a reminiscent look. Among the goods sent over, there was a young noble lady who had fled from her home. Her skin, figure, looks, I have no idea how to describe it. I still remember her to this day. What a pity that she committed suicide. As they spoke, they suddenly felt their vision brighten as they subconsciously looked up into the sky. Apart from the pattering rain, there was an abnormal silver bolt of lightning that was snaking its way through the dark clouds that hid the crimson moon and stars. Suddenly, a gigantic bolt of lightning that illuminated the surrounding waters smote down, heading straight for the Single-Eyed Skull. Boom! The bolts began to spread out randomly as the wooden ship burst into flame. Deafening thunder echoed in the pirates' ears. Right on the heels of that, silver bolts of lightning struck down like they were brandishing their claw. The tiny sailboat was instantly plunged into a lightning forest. At that moment, the thick lightning bolts that were about to interweave together had suddenly separated. They split apart in violation of the natural laws, and they failed to hit the Single-Eyed Skull. They hung close to the ship's surroundings before striking the pitch-black water, lighting up the surrounding sea as sizzling lightning bolts snaked out in a spectacle. The pirates on the deck suffered from the strike. One of them had been charred black like an overburnt piece of wood. Two collapsed as their bodies convulsed. There really is a problem. Above the gray fog, Klein couldn't help but sigh when he saw the scene of his lightning storm being dispelled. He was certain that this was a power at the level of a demigod. If he had rashly infiltrated the Single-Eyed Skull, even with creeping hunger, death knell, and Grossel's travels, there was no way he could put up an effective resistance against such strange power. And by then, he wouldn't have the time to pray to himself and respond using the sea god scepter above the gray fog. Taking a deep breath, Klein made all the blue gems on the tip of the white-bone scepter light up. Round the Single-Eyed Skull, there were two kinds of sounds in the storm. One was piercingly sharp, as though it could prick through one's eardrums and penetrate one's brain. The other was deep, sounding like a beating heart as it struck on one's spirit body. This gave the pirates an extremely uncomfortable experience, with many having the urge to vomit blood. However, this was only the beginning. The sound of splashing water intensified as a dark wave surged up to a height of nearly 10 meters, running opposite the island's cliffside. The wave was like a wall created by a deity as he pushed it toward the Single-Eyed Skull with an invisible hand. This was a tsunami that Klein created. It could already be considered a calamity. The whooshing sound of the waves sounded like explosions as the pirates on board looked at the dark sky outside, the churning clouds, and the massive tsunami. It felt like the apocalypse mentioned in mythical legends had arrived. They lost all will to save themselves. But as they were waiting in despair for the final judgment, a disturbance that didn't abide by logic or scientific laws appeared in the middle of the waves created by the tsunami. An indescribable vortex rapidly took form as it tore through the entire wave, causing the terrifying waves to rapidly collapse as a result. Midst a rapturous rumble, a secondary wave threw the single-eyed skull up high into the air as the gigantic wave from before dispersed, spraying a portion of its load onto the ship. One of the masts broke, and the ship was in shambles. Even the deck was completely flooded. Whoosh! A strong wind suddenly stirred and swept up the pirates, turning into a hurricane that exceeded its own limits, pushing the airborne single-eyed skull further towards the sea. The ship began to ride the squall as it flew across the sky, covering a distance of several nautical miles without landing in the undulating water. It was as though it was an airship that continued stably proceeding forward. Klein was amazed at the demigod or sealed artifact of the corresponding level inside the single-eyed skull for nullifying the tsunami. He sighed at his lacking sequence, as he couldn't create the destructive tsunami that Kalvatua had previously created, despite stirring the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. In the meantime, he controlled the hurricane and ensured that the single-eyed skull didn't lose its support and plummet, afraid that it would leave his 5 nautical-mile range of influence. At that moment, his goal wasn't to destroy the single-eyed skull, nor was it to capture crazy Captain Connor's Victor, but to force out the demigod or sealed artifact hidden inside the ship. Powerhouse or item at this level was scarce in the world. By seeing their appearance, he would know who they were sooner or later, as well as which organization they belonged to. And this provided the subsequent direction for the investigation regarding the Great Smog of Backland. I hope it's not from the seer pathway, otherwise, who knows if it's his true face or not. However, this is also a good thing. Since I'm investigating the truth of the Great Smog, I'll figure out what NC Zangwill is doing, and I'll make preparations for my subsequent revenge. I'll also be able to successfully find the Bizarro Sorcerer Potion formula and main ingredients. As Klein silently sighed, he made the gem on the tip of the Sea God Scepter amid a pure azure light. With a hum, the single-eyed skull's flight experienced a change. It plummeted like a roar and didn't even manage to glide. Suddenly, it turned very, very light, landing on the sea's surface like a feather caressing a human's face. At that moment, Klein, who had exhausted plenty of spirituality, was just about to muster his remaining strength to create another tsunami when he heard an explosive boom from the scene. It was a terrifying sonic boom. Furthermore, it was different from normal sonic booms, as though it was mixed with the howling sounds of the wind. It was from Sea King John Cotman. Although he was still a distance away, he wielded mastery of these waters, so he could exert his influence across space while he rushed over. This was a Sequence 3 saint who was close to that of an angel. The terrifying sonic boom sent the single-eyed skull flying out. There was no hesitation on whether it would harm anyone. After all, there was nothing wrong with striking down on pirates. Meanwhile, Klein felt a psyche that was so potent that it was terrifying as it swept across the area in search of any spots that appeared abnormal. It caused the scene before his eyes to be affected as everything turned indistinct. After resisting another blast, Klein calmly and rationally ended the response. He shut down the corresponding prayer scene before throwing the Sea God Scepter into the junk pile. The gap isn't anything trivial. If Sea King didn't appear, I wouldn't have the confidence in forcing out that demigod. My sequence is still too low, giving me troubles when using the scepter, as it's overly burdensome. However, at sea, the storm pathway is really powerful. They're practically mobile calamities. The powers displayed by that demigod had the key elements of distortion, confusion, loaning, and violation of normality. It appears to be the Black Emperor paths of the divine. Others might not realize it, but I have the corresponding card of blasphemy. It definitely isn't only a Sequence 5 mentor of confusion, account of the fallen. The military has a portion of the potion formula for the Black Emperor pathway, but it seems to be limited to the first 5 sequences. They lack sequences 4 and above. Although Klein failed to force the demigod or corresponding sealed artifact out, he had gained a certain number of clues from their reaction. He suspected that a particular faction in the royal family wasn't only cooperating with the demoness sect and NC Zangwill, but it was also secretly in cahoots with a faction that wielded most of the sequences of the Black Emperor pathway. The descendants of Solomon or Trunzo is king of the 5 seas Nast involved in them. Klein was in serious thought when he heard overlapping prayers in his ear. It broke his train of thought as he instinctively emanated his spirituality and touched the rippling light beside his chair. Then he saw Danitz. This well-known pirate had his eyes closed as he piously prayed to the fool. CC0, Klein took out his pocket watch in a daze and took a few looks at the time to confirm that it was almost 3 in the morning. Is he nuts? Why is he praying in the middle of the night? Does he not want me to sleep? Klein watched carefully in exasperated amusement and discovered that Danitz looked tipsy. There was even faint singing echoing outside. The crew members of the Golden Dream are having another bonfire party. Are they celebrating the departure of Jam and Sparrow? To think they celebrated all the way into the middle of the night. Klein instantly understood why Danitz was praying at that moment. He took a deep breath as he emanated his will into the halo, saying in a deep voice, "Those who say my name are on my mind." See, King John Cotman arrived at Saimim Island as he began searching for the abnormal tsunami that had happened here, as well as the ship that belonged to an unknown pirate crew. He was certain that there was a demigod on board that ship. This tall and brawny cardinal of the Church of Storms with thick, dark blue hair, a high-ranking deacon of the mandated Punisher, clenched his fists as the dark clouds in the sky cracked open, sending crimson sunlight scattering across the sea. After identifying the positions of the stars, John Cotman flew in a particular direction. Suddenly, his speed slowed down because he saw a pirate ship with a flag fluttering with the single-eyed skull emblem. The ship wasn't manned by anyone as it drifted in the wind. Scarlet flames were everywhere on it, along with charred corpses. In the middle of one of the masts, a middle-aged man was tied to it. He wore a triangular hat and a black eye patch. His exposed eye was widened and filled with horror. A wooden pole had impaled him in his chest as blood dyed everything. His life and spirit body had completely dissipated. Situated beyond the storm, the Golden Dream had crimson-red moonlight shine through the thin clouds and onto one of its rooms which was dark and unlit. Danitz was standing beside his bed, motionless. It was as though he had encountered the Beyonder powers, resembling Medusa's petrifying gaze. He couldn't help but grind his teeth loudly as his feet indiscernibly trembled. An endless grayish-white fog and an indistinct figure that stood high above everything, saying the awe-inspiring words, "Those who say my name are on my mind," filled his mind. There really was a response. There really was a response. Danitz's lips quivered as he muttered silently to himself. He felt that his calves had gone soft. This was the first time he was receiving a response from a prayer. He was frightened out of his wits. He long knew that the fool was an unknown existence, the figure whom the secret organization backing Jam and Sparrow believed in, and that he had already made a connection due to chanting his honorific name. If he had any actions of disloyalty or betrayal, he would immediately die a baffling death, but this knowledge stemmed from the knowledge Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina had taught him. He had never encountered similar situations before, and he had never imagined that an unknown existence would respond to him. When the fog, figure, and voice suddenly appeared before his eyes and ears, he learned for the first time that mighty existences would directly respond to their believer. Yes, deep down, Danitz had unknowingly changed the unknown existence into a mighty existence. Just as he recovered from his shock, he hurriedly took a few deep breaths as he attempted to pace about to relieve the remnant horrors in his heart. However, just as he took a stride with his right foot, he discovered that his legs had gone limp. All he could do was collapse onto his bed before barely managing to turn around to sit up. Really is a magnificent existence. It's real, Danitz muttered softly as he came to a clear realization that he had involved himself in something serious. Back in the book world, as he had only chanted the honorific name without discovering any abnormalities, all he felt was fear having known of the possible outcomes. Now he was facing a hidden danger that finally outlined itself, as well a future he couldn't see clearly. How could he not plunge into an inescapable pit of extreme fear? After an unknown period of time, Danitz exhaled as he consoled himself. It might not be a bad thing. At the very least, Jam and Sparrow is still living, and he's leading quite a good life. Upon having this thought, he forced a smile. I'm a member of a secret organization, and in the future, a person blessed by a magnificent existence. As his thoughts raced, Danitz decided to pray every morning when he woke up. He believed that no existence would dislike a pious believer. Of course, he would keep in mind the revelation and often pray inwardly. The next morning, Klein woke up normally, having exhausted himself the previous night. He slowly got out of bed and saw that the skies were blue and the ground outside was wet. The entire world seemed to be cleansed by water, making it abnormally fresh. However, the disorderly leaves, broken branches, and all sorts of trash were an indication that it wasn't a peaceful night. After washing up, Klein wore an ordinary Lonese face, ordered a cup of gurney sap, something that originated from Simim Island, and a rather heavy choice for breakfast Titova to make up for his previous night's expenditure. As he drank the beverage that resembled lemonade with sugar and milk, he ate the fresh, fragrant meal that mixed mutton and fish together, along with the sweet and slightly sour flavor of the fruit. Klein held up the newspapers provided by the inn with great pleasure, as he read through the papers starting with the Sanya Morning Post and News Report. At the end of breakfast, he flipped open Strange Cases, a paper that was rather popular among adventurers, and he saw a striking article headline, Bloody Infighting Amidst Storm. According to sources, there was intense infighting on Crazy Captain Connor's Victor's single-eyed skull. The pirates executed Crazy Captain and killed each other, and reports say that no one survived. All of this evil was concealed by the terrifying storm last night. No one was aware of the conflict until the single-eyed skull was found drifting around Samim Harbor. The article attached an unclear photo, seemingly captured from the harbor in secret. The photo's single-eyed skull's characteristics stood out at once. It was heavily damaged, and many spots were charred black. Only a single mast remained intact, while the middle mast had a figure with a triangular hat pinned to it. It's Connor's Victor, he died just like that. Klein's pupils constricted as he seriously contemplated. It can almost be confirmed that there was a demigod on the ship last night. When he saw that Crazy Captain was targeted, or with Sea King in pursuit, he could only care for himself. Unable to bring Connors with him, he decisively silenced him and destroyed all evidence. Klein, who had plans on continuing his pursuits of Crazy Captain, felt dejected. He realized that, although the trail of clues hadn't been completely cut off, there was little of it left. The only matter he was aware of at that moment was that the demigod likely belonged to the Black Emperor pathway. From the intensity of the storm last night, the single-eyed skull was likely sent to the harbor by Sea King John Cotman so as to do any follow-up investigation. I wonder if they will have any additional findings. Yes, I can get Mr. Hanged Man to keep an eye out for it in the Church of Storms. There's no need to inform him since the tarot gathering will be this afternoon. The world can directly commission him to do so. Klein quickly made up his mind before downing the rest of the gurney sap. Then he returned to his room and planned to retrieve the radio transceiver which he had placed above the gray fog for an extended period of time to contact Arrows. He wanted to see if it had any other clues regarding the bizarro sorcerer potion formula. Having left Oravi's East Sea, which was also where the Aurora Order's demigod had previously targeted him, Klein now dared to use items with the gray fog's aura. However, he knew very well that he couldn't do it frequently, and each use couldn't be for too long. Otherwise, there was the possibility of the true creator detecting it. Due to this reason and his wariness against Arrows, he planned on doing whatever he could do himself, and he would seek advice from others if possible. He only planned on playing the question and answer game if he was out of option. In the Blue Avenger, which was docked at the Resistance's private harbor, Alger planned on getting one last resupply before his return to Pasu Island. After instructing his crew which items to purchase, he changed into local clothing and he went straight for Bayam. After circling a few times, he came to the Cathedral of Waves, planning on reporting to Diocese Bishop Chogo about recent developments. Although he was returning to Pasu Island and reporting his work to the upper echelons of the church, he knew very well who his immediate superior was. He knew that he needed to act appropriately and not make his superior believe that he was skipping the chain of command by directly establishing relations with the upper echelon. Chogo remained hale and hearty, as he was very pleased with Alger's proactive reporting. After he heard that, he said with a brisk tone, "There's no need to worry about it. It's just routine reporting. I've already informed His Eminence Cotman that you're devoted to the Lord and are loyal to the church. You're one of the most trusted captains, and His Eminence Cotman will inform the Council of Cardinals of this." He paused, but without giving Alger any time to speak, he continued, "In addition, there's another mission. Investigate people who are intimately tied to Crazy Captain Connor's Victor. This is a mission directly issued by His Eminence Cotman. You have to take it seriously. Investigate people related to Crazy Captain." Alger was puzzled, but he didn't question it. Instead, he struck his right fist on his left breast and said, "Yes, Your Excellency." The grizzled Chogo nodded and thought for 2 seconds before asking, "Do you know Jam and Sparrow?" This question sounded like a bolt out of the blue. It left Alger's pupils constricting as he nearly lost control on the spot. Thankfully, he was mentally strong, allowing him to barely maintain his normal state. T've heard of him. He's been very famous recently. Not only has he hunted Wormtongue Mither and seriously injured Tracy, but he has also boarded Catlia's future. Alger droned on to hide the stirrings in his heart. Chogo made a terse acknowledgement. You were at sea, so you're a little behind on the news. Jamin Sparrow killed Kirches at Toscarter last week and obtained his bounty. That pirate was indeed a devil, a Sequence 5 devil. Kirches? Agalito's second mate. Alger asked with very honest emotion. He knew that Kirches was suspected to be a Sequence 5, but he didn't know that he was of the devil pathway. And the fact he was both a Sequence 5 and a devil meant plenty of things. It meant that he was difficult to kill, which meant that Jamin Sparrow had very likely killed Kirches during a sudden encounter. This meant that Jamin Sparrow was already at the pinnacle of Sequence 5. If it wasn't because he was seeking to purchase the Sequence 4 potion formula, I might even suspect that he had become a demigod, Alger thought, feeling perturbed. He was alarmed to realize that in a week, the world had obtained the Sequence 5 Ocean Songster potion formula and main ingredient, killed a Sequence 5 devil, and might very possibly have a Sequence 6 notary potion formula in hand as well. How did he do it? Alger realized that he was feeling a little frightened of the world. Of course, it wasn't something unacceptable for him. This was because he knew that the world was Mr. Fool's blessed representative. And Mr. Fool's blessed clearly wasn't a single person. If one was responsible for the notary potion formula, while another was responsible for the ocean songster, then it was possible that Jamin Sparrow had only killed Kirches. Although this similarly left one apprehensive, it didn't seem like a fabricated story. Chogo nodded solemnly. Yes, Agalito's lack of reaction implies something. Focus on gathering information about Jamin Sparrow. All right, Your Excellency. Alger bowed reverently, having already decided to be perfunctory with the mission as much as he could. Inside the inn, Klein placed the radio transceiver on the table. Before long, rush clacking sounds were heard. Amidst the clacking sounds, the radio transceiver spewed out new illusory paper. On the paper were words composed of Lonese. Great Master, your loyal and humble servant Arodes has finally caught up to you. There's no need to be so excited. Oh, the way Arodes speaks is as professional as always. He didn't express his bitterness about not being able to contact me for prolonged periods of time, nor did he question me about why I haven't been looking for it. It directly blamed itself by claiming that it hadn't caught up to me. It makes me feel a little guilty. But I still need to be wary. Klein was momentarily at a loss for an answer. Arodes didn't wait as it used the radio transceiver to produce an emoticon of carefully peeking out on the illusory paper. Great Master, the ruler above the spirit world, your servant has sensed that you are one step closer to returning to your holy throne, am I right? This fellow has evolved really quickly. He's already using colored text to form a nascent form of emoticons. From Arodes's point of view, I'm a true god taking steps to find myself. That's why, although it can clearly sense that I'm only a Sequence 5, it still treats me with respect and is even more humble. Klein understood that the mirror was deliberately asking a question, so he nodded in a frank manner. Yes, you have already answered my question. As an exchange and a rule that I need to overlook, you can raise a question to me. Arodes typed quickly in response before adding a smiley face. Klein didn't hesitate and asked directly, where can the potion formula for Bizarro Sorcerer be found? The illusory paper spat out a long paragraph of complicated symbols before turning into a mirror as it represented a realistic scene. It was a dark cathedral without any natural light source. Inside it was a bunch of squirming things that were all so blurry. It looked as though it was a pencil drawing that had been wiped by an eraser, preventing any exact details to be seen. However, Arodes added a bunch of text at the bottom of the scene. This is Zaratol. In his advancement to Sequence 1, Attendant of Mysteries, he lost control and became a monster. However, Great Master, you have to be careful. He is a very crafty person. Perhaps everything about him is just an act with a purpose. Team unable to look at him directly, as it will bring me harm. Aside from him, you will be unable to obtain the potion formula from any demigod from the secret order. This is because back then, Xeritol would directly provide the high-sequence potion to them, and there's almost no way to use any Beyonder methods to reverse divine. What a detailed answer, and it even gave me the additional knowledge that the sequence 1 corresponding to the seer pathway is a tendon of mysteries. Does it mean being an angel that serves upon mystery? From the looks of it, the secret order approach can only work by directly facing Xeritol to obtain the potion formula. And I'm not even capable of viewing him directly. It's no wonder the Snake of Fate Will Ossipton told me to find the crazy Xeritol without mentioning the secret order. Klein was moved by Arodz's attitude. If he didn't feel that he lacked the level and strength to commandeer this sealed artifact, he even planned on truly treating it as his servant. Amidst the clear clicking sounds, another segment of the illusory piece of paper appeared, presenting another scene. It was a towering mountain peak. On it was a swath of dilapidated palaces. Inside it was a gigantic stone chair. Klein was very familiar with this scene. Without Arodz's footnote, he knew what it represented. The Antigonus family's treasure, hidden at the main peak of the Hornisus mountain range. White paper continued being spat out as a new scene was presented. Just like a movie, it had changes in the camera angle. The first scene that appeared in Klein's eyes was a lofty Gothic-style bell tower and beautiful palaces around it. The former represented the Bell of Order, and the latter represented the Sodla Palace. They were landmark buildings in backlight. The scene changed, and soon there was a new building on the paper. It was a pure black cathedral with 2 symmetrical bell towers. The scene of the cathedral's interior grew larger, and soon it presented the entirety of the interior. It was then fixed at a pair of iron black doors that swung open. The door was abnormally heavy, and on it were 7 dark sacred emblems, as though they were guards of the tenebrous heaven. Channy's Gate, St. Samuel Cathedral. Klein recognized the familiarly styled door. Based on the architectural style, he confirmed that the cathedral was the church of the Evernight goddess's headquarters of the Backland Diocese, St. Samuel Cathedral. White paper was spat out, and the scene changed as it plunged deep into the darkness. On an empty bookshelf built from bones, there sat an ancient notebook. It was a black hard-covered book. Klein recognized the notebook at once. It was the Antigonus family's notebook, which had caused the death of the original Klein. After going round and round, everything came back full circle. Klein silently observed it for a moment, and after the scenes disappeared, did he regain control of his thought processes. Yes, back then, the members of the Aurora Order were able to see the clown potion formula from the notebook. Having been acknowledged by it, the content presented to me will definitely be completely different from before when I flipped through it. It should have the arcane sorcerer potion formula. It just lacks the ingredients or characteristics. Though this notebook has been sealed behind St. Samuel Cathedral's Channy's Gate all this time. To get it from there, the difficulty in doing so wouldn't be lower than finding Xeritol and facing him. Directly, back then, there were high-sequence Beyonders involved in the Great Smog of Backland. After I reported the matter to the Backland Diocese's church through Miss Justice, the matter was quickly quelled. This is sufficient enough to prove that the Backland Diocese has plenty of power. They have no lack of demigods or sealed artifacts. Yes, regardless, Peel need to return to Backland first and see if there are any opportunities. In contrast, I'd prefer not to head to the Hornisus mountain range. Reining in his thoughts, Klein looked at the radio transceiver which had turned dark and solemn. Last night, who was the demigod on crazy Captain Connor's Victor's ship? Clacking sounds quickly sounded as the illusory paper from before vanished as new ones were spat out. The content on the piece of paper was likewise a realistic scene. On an exquisite brass chandelier, 5 candles of different heights spread their warmth and light. A middle-aged man wearing a triangular hat and black eye patch stood before a cabinet that stored grape wine, champagne, and tequila. He was humbly looking opposite him. Opposite him was a tall figure in a black cloak. Its face was completely hidden beneath the hood. The figure didn't seem to have a real head, only a blob of heavily distorted darkness that was embedded above the neck. Thanks to the portraits from Bounty Notices, Klein recognized the one-eyed man to be crazy Captain Connors. His disheveled and oily hair cascaded down and happened to cover his neck. Opposite him is likely that demigod. But he deliberately disguised himself and did the corresponding anti-divination preparation. For Arods to be able to produce a scene of this level is already impressive enough. Klein wasn't too disappointed. Instead, he carefully memorized the figure's bill. more than 1.85 meters tall, but less than 1.9 meters, rather long arms, and when hanging his hands down it almost reaches the knees. The broad shoulders prop up the cloak. The feet are faced outwards to a certain degree. As an expert in disguises, Klein believed that when a person disguised himself and prepared a certain level of anti-divination measures, there was a high chance that he wouldn't take note of disguising his bill, especially when one's body didn't have any particular trait. Therefore, this can provide a certain amount of clue. This allows Klein to find the person familiar when he sees the target. Very good. It's your turn to ask. After keeping that in mind, Klein stopped scrutinizing the figure as he waited for Arrodes's question with piqued interest. He was curious as to how Arrodes would continue breaking through his image of him. The typing sound slowed down as it seemed to appear hesitant. Bit by bit, the illusory white paper was spat out. Great Master, see, can I say something to you? Yes, Klein answered the question, puzzled. He began to look forward to what Arrodes had to say. The sound of typing hastened as it exuded an obvious sense of warmth. On the illusory paper, a single line appeared, Great Master, happy birthday. This is belated. Your current body was born on 4th March, 1327. I originally wanted to wish you a happy birthday at midnight of that day, but I failed to keep up with you. It's a topic that really exceeded my expectations. I even forgot about my own birthday. The corners of Klein's lips twitched as he was at a loss for words. He had received the original Klein's memory fragments and received parts of his emotion. He knew the birthday, but for a person who led a solitary life, why would he remember such thing? This fellow is actually the first person to wish me a happy birthday. Benson and Melissa must be feeling more upset today. The interview should have ended in February. I wonder if Benson succeeded in becoming a civil servant. Klein felt poignant as the way he looked at the radio transceiver warmed up. He thought for a moment as he calmly asked, Third question, your origin. The typing sounds paused for 2 seconds before sounding out again. A white piece of paper was spat out as a new scene surfaced. Large amounts of black sticky liquid spewed out from the ground as they spread outwards in a distorted manner. They grew different numbers of arms and legs before becoming strange monsters that charged ahead. During this process, a speck of light was shot out along with the black liquid before landing on a rock, to which it rapidly fused together, turning into a mirror with ancient patterns and black gems adorning its two sides. What kind of strange scene is this? This was how Arrodes was born. What was that speck of light? Where did it originate from? It does seem like a Beyonder characteristic. Klein came up with a preliminary interpretation of the scene. The typing sounds didn't stop as another line appeared. Great Master, do you have any other question? Taking note of the time, Klein shook his head. No. You have finished answering the questions, and it's time for me to leave. Great Master, the ruler above the spirit world, your loyal and humble servant, Arrodes, looks forward to serving you again and hopes to be able to continue following in your footsteps. By Tilda, at the end of the illusory piece of paper, a hand-waving emoticon was presented. Novel inside the quiet room in the inn, the dark and silent radio transceiver instantly returned back to normal as its surroundings stopped being eerie. Klein busily set up the ritual and sacrificed it above the gray fog before having the time to consider the answers he had received. According to the clues provided by Arrodes, and combining the answers from Mr. Azek and Will Ossipton, Klein had a basic idea on how he should proceed. It wasn't just because he wished to return to Backland for some rest and reorganization, but because he viewed the large city as a main locale that he would spend a long period of time being active in. He wanted to see if he could steal the Antigonus family's notebook from the Church of the Evernight Goddesses, St. Samuel Cathedral. If he confirmed that there weren't any solutions, he would attempt to switch to neighboring Beyonder pathways. But if that was impossible, he had no choice but to take the final route, head to the main peak of the Hornisus mountain range. I definitely can't use my identity as Sherlock Moriarty when I'm back in Backland, unless I wish to dig out and see Zangwill or the royal family faction that's hiding in the darkness. However, when contacting people I'm familiar with or using the resources of the Church of Steam, I can transform back into Sherlock Moriarty. In short, I have to create a new identity. Furthermore, it has to be completely separate from Jam and Sparrow. I won't directly return to Pritz Harbor this time. I'll make a detour to Daisy Bay and make sure that no one can figure out my background. Klein's thoughts raced, and he soon came up with a clear train of thought. After determining the next steps of action to take, he planned on drawing some blood and heading above the gray fog to explore Grossel's travels using his spirit body. But in consideration that there was a tarot gathering in the afternoon, he lay back in bed and took the time to rest and relax. The future smoothly cruised through the undulating waves, as Admiral of Stars Catlia stood by the window, watching the scenery that seemed to go on without end. And by the deck, there were Nina's exasperated shouts from time to time. She would be angrily scolding Frank Lee for producing a bunch of fast-growing, beef-flavored mushrooms that enjoyed eating fish. Catlia sighed silently as she nudged the heavy glasses on her nose bridge. At that moment, her spiritual perception was suddenly triggered as she looked down at her study desk. At some point in time, a few pieces of yellowed paper had appeared there. The Emperor's diary entries. She finally sent a messenger over. Catalia turned around in delight and picked up the few pieces of paper that were akin to a preliminary probe. By 3 in the afternoon, having memorized the symbols, Catlia saw the illusory crimson light surge at her like a tide, drowning her within. Under a high dome propped up by stone columns, Catlia saw similar red beams soar up, transforming into indistinct figures. She didn't look carefully, as she realized that a pair of familiar glasses had naturally appeared over her nose bridge. It was almost a perfect replica of the one from the outside world. Then she caught Miss Justice elegantly stand up from the corner of her eye. Miss Justice briskly greeted the figure at the seat of honor. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool Tilda." Audrey was in a good mood recently. After she returned to her family's castle, as an obedient daughter, she helped her mother, Lady Caitlin, resolve some psychological problems that stemmed from her age and physical condition. She received extremely good feedback, allowing her to conclude more of the acting principles for psychiatrists. Amongst them, the most important principle was to help others resolve psychological issues. He suspected that this was the reason why the potion's name was psychiatrist and not psychologist. Miss Justice is very happy. Klein appeared infected as he nodded with a smile as a response. During this process, he noticed that Mr. Hanged Man appeared to be preoccupied with concern. He looked like he was hesitating and struggling, having not made up his mind. This means that Mr. Hanged Man is able to buy the Ocean Songster's potion formula and main ingredient, but he will have to pay a huge price. I thought he would request to pay for it in installments. The fool Klein reined in his gaze without any signs of unrest as he surveyed the area. After Miss Justice was done with her greeting, Catlia looked towards the end of the long bronze table. "Honorable Mr. Fool, I found 3 pages of Roselle's diary. Here it comes. I wonder if the 3 diary pages specially selected by Queen Mystic will be valuable. For instance, providing clues to the card of blasphemy for the seer pathway. This will be able to provide me with another alternative." Klein was filled with anticipation as he calmly and naturally said, "Very good. You can think of a request." "Yes, Mr. Fool," Catlia replied in an impeccable manner, before requesting to conjure the contents of the diary pages. Upon seeing her behavior and thinking about how she acted in the dream, Klein was rather gratified. He felt like a teacher having successfully reformed a student. This is the first time Ma'am Hermit is providing Emperor Roselle's diary entry. With the standards and ability she has showcased, it's impossible for her to have failed to find it in the past. Yes, in the past, she was more of an observer. After being punished by Mr. Fool, she has truly integrated into our tarot club. Together with how Catalia had performed last week, Audrey made a judgment. Meanwhile, she sensed that Mr. Hanged Man didn't seem normal. He looked like he was anticipating something, but was also unable to bring himself to part with something. She was rather intrigued. Klein didn't wait too long before the 3 diary pages were conjured and came into his hands. Derek and the other members instinctively fell silent, so as to not disturb Mr. Fool's reading. February. Today is Bornova's birthday. He's already a healthy, strong, honest, and kind young man. His piousness has won the church's favor. Everyone is congratulating me, saying that Bornova will definitely become a saint. They praise him for how pure and flawless his faith is. He should be very happy, but I can't hide my dismay. I wish that my children can be more human, to have more emotion. I hope that they can be themselves, and not just a believer of a deity. However, almost everyone believes from the bottom of their hearts that Bornova's present state is excellent. Matilda is the same. Likewise for Seal. Most of my noble officials share the same feeling. Only Bernadette shares my point of view. She has told me in private that she believes a person should be more self-centered, as long as they don't harm others. Recalling the words Zaratul had said during Bornova's birth, as well as the premonition I've had after becoming a demigod, my heart is turning heavy. Adorable angel, heh, what an adorable angel. T.S. this you being wary of me. T.S. this how you are attempting to control me. No, you can probably never understand the pride inside me. To me, so what if you're a deity? I can replace you. 11th February, contact with Zaratul was fruitless again. Ever since he obtained that Antigonus notebook, the number of times this secret order leader appears has been decreasing. I've no idea what secret he's scheming. Anyway, he will definitely not tell me. 12th February. I made a mystical item very suitable for Bernadette. This can allow her to effectively avoid the hidden sage's nagging, as long as she doesn't proactively pray and seek a response. Yes, this item seems to be able to help saints enter the easternmost front of the Sanya Sea, where the battlefield of the gods is. It prevents one from being influenced by the true Creator's ravings, and that place likely hides the secret to the forsaken land of God. I was only making a present for my daughter out of fun. To think that it has such powerful effects. Bernadette, your dad is really the best artisan in the world. Best artisan? Does this mean that the Emperor had already reached sequence 2 of the Savant pathway when he wrote this diary entry, that he had become an angel? With the god of steam and machinery present, this is the peak an artisan can attain. It's no wonder that Queen Mystic can freely enter and exit the battlefield of the gods. So it's because of a gift from the Emperor. Indeed, a child with parents is like a treasure. Klein felt wistful. In addition, he could sense Emperor Roselle's repressed and angry feelings from the diary entry. He used his comprehension skills that were honed from his previous life to figure out what was written in between the lines. After he became an angel, the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery obstructed him and suppressed him. The God of Steam and Machinery had exerted some influence on his youngest son, Bornova, making him become the most devout believer and appointing him as someone who could become an angel and enter the land of perfection. And this not only made Emperor Roselle submit to the suppression while having misgivings, but this had also stirred thoughts of rebellion in him. The Emperor later became a public enemy of the world because of this rebellion. Klein nodded inwardly. Meanwhile, he noticed a matter regarding Zaratul. He suspected that the miracle invoker only began aiming for sequence 1 after he obtained the Antigonus family's note. For this, he planned many things, but something happened during his advancement, turning him into a monster. Of course, just as Arod said, Zaratul might not have lost control. He could be hiding something or plotting something. After quickly scanning through it, Klein flipped the page and looked back. It wasn't continuous, and it was brand new content. 5th October. A few primordial moon believers were caught by the Black Suits organization I established. They failed to complete the corresponding sacrificial ritual. Their behavior has intrigued me, as their strength seems to come directly from the Crimson Moon. Unfortunately, large amounts of data have confirmed that the Crimson Moon is really a satellite that's revolving around our planet. Then how is it fusing physics and mystery together? With my present strength, it's not impossible to head for the Crimson Moon. At most, it will be troublesome and a little difficult, but it doesn't seem to be necessary. 17th October, I've finally made up my mind. T will attempt to switch to the neighboring mystery prior pathway. Only by doing so can I become a sequence 1. PvE always suspected that the hidden sage is only a conceptualized unique. Due to some sort of accident, it became sentient and awakened. Therefore, this pathway sequence 1 position is likely still empty. Later years, T have long obtained the potion formula of Knowledge Emperor from that most ancient organization. Now it's time to seek the corresponding ingredients. It might already belong to a particular angel, and it might have fused with an object around it, turning into a warped and evil monster or a chaotic and terrifying sealed artifact. In short, I have to be careful. It's best that I find a suitable helper. Knowledge Emperor. The sequence 1 potion name is rather interesting. If I hadn't directly seen the blasphemy slate, I would have imagined that it belonged to the reader pathway, making it belong to the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. Even stranger, these 2 pathways aren't switchable. T once discussed this matter with that mysterious leader, an old Mr. Hermit. We basically came to a consensus and believe that the reader pathway represents the omniscient part of omnipotent and omniscient. And the mystery prior's savant corresponds to knowledge itself, which is categorized into two aspects. One is more about mystery, while the other is more about reality. When I become a knowledge emperor, Bernadette can stop worrying about the hidden sage's infusion of knowledge. She can also stop being afraid of pursuing knowledge. The emperor eventually switched to the mystery prior pathway. I wonder if he successfully became a knowledge emperor. Perhaps it's because of this that his ties with the Church of Steam completely fractured, making him the public enemy with no one to help him. All he could do was place his hopes on the Twilight Hermit Order, Klein thought poignantly as he came up with possible conjecture. Apart from that, he was rather interested in the Emperor's explanation of how the reader pathway wasn't interchangeable with the mystery prior and savant pathway. He believed that by deepening his understanding of it, he might be able to figure out the rules and rationale behind the interchangeability of Beyonder pathways. The typical Beyonder, the reader, mystery prior, and savant pathway belong to the knowledge domain. There should be a very strong connection between them, yet the former is different. Reader belongs to the omniscient part of the phrase omnipotent and omniscient. Then the secret suppliant, which is the shepherd pathway, is the omnipotent part. Then there must be a certain intersection between the two. For example, being potent as a result of being erudite, and being erudite as a result of being potent. Therefore, they can be interchanged. Starting off from this angle, the storm pathway can be understood as omnipotence in the sea, land, and air domain. The spectator corresponds to the psyche, making it a powerful supplement for storm. Then why can the sun pathway be interchanged with them? Considering how there was an ancient sun god who was deemed to be omnipotent and omniscient, does this mean that the sun pathway is the foundation that accommodates omnipotent and omniscient? Yes, according to such a thought process, mystery prior and savant are different aspects of knowledge itself. That's why they can be interchanged. Then how is assassin and hunter differentiated? What about the Evernight, death, and god of combat pathways? In moments, Klein thought of many things, but he didn't have the time or sufficient knowledge to delve deeper into his analysis. All he could do was temporarily throw the corresponding questions to the back of his mind, and will the third diary page to the top of the stack. At a cursory glance, Klein suddenly became focused. This was because the diary page was very different from the past one. It didn't have a date, and the words were spaced apart. Because it was the original copy, the weight placed on the page when the words were penned was obviously out of the ordinary. Klein swept through the page as the contents were reflected in his mind. No. Impossible. How can that happen? If my predictions aren't wrong, I'm not the only one who met with that encounter. No. No. How can that happen? The thing that I saw tells me that everything will be destroyed. Likewise for everything I've created. No. I can't accept such an ending. Have to work hard to save myself. I can't rely on the seven deities. As long as I ascend to the throne of Sequence Zero, only then will I and the things I value be preserved. Should I attempt to pull Mr. Door back into the real world? No. Although he claims to be only a Sequence One, I believe that he isn't just an ordinary Sequence One. It's very likely that he will bring unexpected catastrophe upon me. The Chinese words, which were much larger than those on the first 2 pages, had occupied the yellowed piece of paper in a haphazard manner. There wasn't much content, but it left Klein's head throbbing painfully. Back when he was writing this diary entry, Emperor Roselle was very likely a Sequence One knowledge emperor. The content he wrote was infused with a potent sense of mystery and was colored with his emotion. This also meant that if Klein had read the contents in the real world, he might very well turn mentally unstable or go mad and lose control on the spot. Thankfully, Ma'am Hermit doesn't know Chinese. Otherwise, she would have mutated when she was memorizing the contents. Even if she doesn't understand Chinese, she must have found it especially tiring and draining. If one is exposed to it for extended periods of time, visual and auditory hallucinations can't be avoided. Furthermore, there's a high chance that early signs of losing control will appear, Klein thought, congratulating himself for his good luck. His focus quickly turned back onto the diary entry as a sense of puzzlement surfaced. What did the Emperor see that made him so emotional? His mood was also rather extreme. No, the agitation and rashness as seen in the words are a little abnormal. It doesn't match the image of someone who has occupied a high position for extended periods of time. It doesn't match the level of an angel. Even in his final days, he said that after he dies, he didn't care if floods deluge the heaven. He didn't lose his composure or appear that agitated back then. Who influenced him? Or did something corrupt and pollute his thoughts? Also, he mentioned that he's not the only one who met with that encounter. What is he referring to? Transmigration. It's true that he isn't the only one who transmigrated for no baffling reason. There's also me, or even more. As thoughts flashed through his mind, Klein didn't waste any time. He made the 3 diary pages vanish as he smiled at Catley. Have you thought of the request? Catley abode in preparation as she said, I wish to know why Emperor Roselle went mad in his later years. Audrey, who was in the same row as her, blinked. She believed that she had heard wrongly, as she didn't expect Ma'am Hermit to immediately ask such a heavy question. Furthermore, how does she know that Emperor Roselle went mad in his later years? Also, she only handed 3 pages, so how can she ask a question of this magnitude? It doesn't abide by the principle of equivalent exchange. Audrey had many thoughts arise in her mind, but she didn't stop Ma'am Hermit's question. Instead, she waited for Mr. Fool's response with piqued interest and inexplicable excitement. Alger and Lynn and Force similarly held their breaths. They cast their gaze at the end of the bronze table. Only Derek and the world seemed oblivious. Klein thought and chuckled. First, we need to accept reality. Team not omniscient, nor am I omnipotent. He had said those words in a relaxed, self-deprecating manner, but the hermit and company didn't show any signs of unrest. Instead, they appeared even more reverent. To them, it was obvious that Mr. Fool wasn't omnipotent and omniscient. Ignoring their guesses regarding Mr. Fool's state, this hidden existence's honorific name didn't have any related descriptions that explained the problem. Furthermore, none of the present true gods and evil gods had honorific names that involved omnipotence and omniscience. After setting their expectations, Klein began to answer the hermit's question. He also wished to know what Roselle encountered in his later years. At present, it can be confirmed that due to an unknown cause and source of stimulation, Roselle cast his gaze on Sequence 0. He didn't explain what Sequence 0 corresponded to. In the Tarot Club, there were more people who knew of it than those who didn't. Even those who didn't know could have guessed something. Sequence 0, the Emperor wanted to become a god. It's no wonder that it said that he went mad in his later years. Audrey knew what Sequence 0 meant as she instantly sighed. Likewise for Alger. Cattleya clearly knew what Sequence 0 implied. She expressed her gratitude while in thought as she retracted her gaze. Sequence 0, Emlyn and Fours ruminated over the phrase, as though they had just realized that there was a position above Sequence 1 that belonged to true God. Derek looked at Mr. Fool with a muddled expression. He didn't understand what was wrong with Emperor Roselle's attempt, someone who had a strong presence in history. In the City of Silver, if anyone had the chance, every resident would wish to become a Sequence 0 true God, so as to create a more sustainable living environment, or to lead everyone out of the Forsaken Land. Klein didn't elaborate as he leaned back into his chair and surveyed the area. You may begin. With that said, he controlled the world to look at Derek before smiling deeply. The notary potion formula you want has been acquired. Thank you, Mr. World. According to the agreement, I will remember the debt and await your request, Derek said sincerely. All right. Klein gave a response by controlling the world before making a show of him, requesting Mr. Fool to conjure the formula. Before long, the potion formula was in Little Son's hand. Derek received it in glee as he ravenously scanned the contents of the goatskin. Sequence 6, Notary. Main ingredients, 1 set of crystallized roots of the Tree of Elders, 5 feathers of a spirit-packed bird. Supplementary ingredients, 100 ml of Radiant Spirit-packed trees juice, 1 golden-rimmed sunflower, 1 white-rimmed sunflower, 5 drops of aqua fern juice. Without waiting for the others to speak, the world looked at Alger and said once more, As you know, I have your Ocean Songster potion formula and main ingredient. Audrey and company were momentarily dumbfounded. Cattleya couldn't hide her alarm as she looked at the world. She vividly remembered that Jam and Sparrow had just hunted Slaughterer Kirches a week ago. How did he obtain the Ocean Songster potion formula and main ingredient? Don't tell me he killed an Ocean Songster. That would be considered a quasi-high-ranking member in the Church of Storms. It's only been a week. Cattleya found this unrealistic. Mr. World has also obtained the potion formula and main ingredient for Ocean Songster. He's really impressive. Derek moved his gaze from the goatskin in his hand and looked at the gentleman seated at the other end of the long bronze table. In his mind, the world's toughness had reached a whole new level, one that could match the weaker members in the six-member council. Forz was also similarly astonished as her poignancy grew deeper. She remembered that back when she first joined the Tarot Club, Mr. World gave her the impression that he was gloomy and reserved. Apart from that, nothing stood out. In the subsequent gatherings, he began to show that he was experienced and knowledgeable, as well as possessing rather impressive ability. At a glance, he was a senior Beyonder who had experienced many things, just second to Mr. Hanged Man amongst the Tarot Club members. This image had already formulated in Force's mind, but in recent months, Miss Magician was repeatedly surprised by the world. He was first capable of obtaining rather important information, and following that, he sold plenty of Beyonder characteristics in a short span of time. He made her involuntarily suspect if he was a Beyonder assassin who was active in the mysterious world. She feared him from the bottom of her heart, but along with that came happiness. This was because it meant that she could commission Mr. World with certain requests that would be met with high chances of success. When the new member, the Hermit, appeared, Force even imagined that Mr. World's halo would be blanketed by this powerful lady. But to her surprise, he had snatched the limelight and blinded everyone with his magnificence. To obtain the Ocean Songster potion formula, its corresponding main ingredient, and the notary potion formula was seemingly impossible by human standard. He really is impressive. I admire this kind of quiet and ordinary person who is actually very capable. Sigh, I wonder when I can become a Viking. After this hunting competition, the winner will receive a prize that's likely something that will allow a sanguine to become stronger. Emlyn White quickly turned his thoughts back to himself. As Audrey was sighing in amazement, she was puzzled about a matter from before. Why is the impressive Mr. World not searching for Emperor Roselle's diary page? He's not like Ma'am Hermit. He has already joined the Tarot Club for quite some time, and he doesn't need to observe. It's not like he doesn't have any requests that don't require him to search for Emperor Roselle's diary pages to obtain something from Mr. Fool, then. Why isn't he searching for them? Has he privately submitted them? But why? Imperceptibly, Audrey felt that Mr. World and Mr. Fool had a connection to a certain degree, but she wasn't able to confirm it, as there were just too many possibilities. At this moment, Alger turned to the seat of honor after a few seconds of silence. Honorable Mr. Fool, I wish to communicate privately with the world. Here it comes. Klein nodded with anticipation as he isolated everyone's senses. Alger waited for 2 seconds before turning back to look at the world. Jam and Sparrow. T will use an unknown primitive island's coordinates in exchange. On the island, there aren't only extinct Beyonder creatures that cannot be found on the northern and southern continent, but there's an ancient ruin of unknown age. Back then it was discovered by Kalangos and me. Back then, we lacked the strength to delve deep inside. However, he discovered certain traces, and he suspected that the ruins hide something extremely important. He believes that the value isn't lower than a card created by Emperor Roselle. My strength is inferior to Kalangos, and I didn't go as deep as he did. I had no idea what he saw, other than guesses about the situation from his remarks. What Mr. Hanged Man said holds plenty of information. From the looks of it, he long knew Vice Admiral Hurricane Kalangos. They had even adventured together and found the primitive island and ancient ruins. And previously, he was also the one who thought of finishing off this pirate admiral while he was away at sea. Mr. Hanged Man isn't an ordinary member of the Church of Storm. His past seems very complicated, and he hides many secrets. Yes, a primitive island's value isn't small. For a secret organization, this can be the foundation to support the growth of its members. Klein controlled the world to appear to be in thought as he attempted to obtain more information from the Hanged Man. With the world not rejecting or agreeing, Alger, who had calmed down, calmly said, "On the island, there are traces of demigod-level Beyonder creatures. To you, that should be something valuable. On this point, I can swear on Mr. Fool's name. I guarantee that I'm not lying. After I obtain the Bizarro Sorcerer's potion formula, I'll have to consider how to obtain the corresponding ingredients. At the level of a demigod, money becomes of little use. Trading gives me the highest chance of obtaining something I need. The location of demigod-level Beyonder creatures is important. That ruin is also quite interesting. The world didn't hesitate as he chuckled. Deal. Alger didn't immediately receive the ocean songster potion formula. Instead, he said, I have a condition. I wish that on your first exploration of the primitive island, that you will do it with me. With Mr. Fool watching all of this, I believe you won't be concerned that I'll be up to no good. Klein considered it for a moment and made the world nod. No problem. I will need companions when heading to dangerous places. I hope that you will have the required strength. Alger wasn't angered by the world's tone as he heaved a sigh of relief. That's why I wish that your first exploration will be after I advance. Of course, if I were to lose control because of my potion, this agreement will naturally be null and void. No problem, the world replied without any qualms. Alger didn't harp on the topic. After obtaining Mr. Fool's agreement, he conjured the situation of the primitive island on a goatskin. It's along the periphery of the Rorsted Sea. It's quite a big island, almost the size of Blue Mountain Island. Klein received the goatskin and quickly scanned through it to gain a general understanding of the primitive island. He quickly looked up and said, I'll hand over the potion formula and main ingredient after the gathering ends. All right. Having made his choice, Alger no longer had any reservation. When hearing that, he felt upheavals going through his heart, but he appeared even more staid on the surface. After the duo's private conversation came to an end, Katlia retracted her gaze at the world and looked at Fours. The meteorite crystal has been obtained. 600 pounds for 60 grams. That's fast, Ma'am Hermit is really efficient. Fours felt delighted, but she was also stumped. After last week's gathering, she had already obtained the crystallized blood of a lavo squid. For that she had paid 600 pounds, leaving her with 230 pounds. Adding the 150 pounds she received this week from her royalties, she was still short of 220 pounds. I'll first borrow from Zio. She should have that much. After I succeed in advancing, I'll try to earn money as quickly as possible. I have to. Force silently drew a breath and said, All right. We will do the transaction tomorrow at this time. Hermit tersely acknowledged, and without wasting any time looked at Audrey. The black hunting giant lizard spinal fluid has been confirmed. 1,800 pounds. There are temporarily no clues for the illusory chime tree's fruit. That's already very good. Better than I expected. Thank you, Ma'am Hermit. Audrey sincerely thanked her, without even minding the price. She recently realized that there was a benefit to establishing the Relic Search and Preservation Foundation. She could use her funds in a more secretive and unnoticeable manner. It made it difficult for her parents to notice. After confirming the two transactions, Katlia surveyed the members as though she was one of them. Any clues to the blood of a mythical creature? Klein immediately controlled the world as he chuckled with a hoarse voice. Are you referring a pure mythical creature? Pure mythical creature. There are impure mythical creatures. Audrey and company were puzzled, but interested by what they heard. Katlia was taken aback as she said, a pure one, which means the blood of an angel. 1 drop is enough. She didn't introduce it in detail back then, because she believed that for the time being such a high-level object wouldn't appear in the Tarot Club unless Mr. Fool was willing to provide her with help. And clearly, Mr. Fool didn't need anyone to explain to him what a mythical creature was. He have certain clues, but I can't guarantee that I can obtain it. Furthermore, it might take another 3 months at least. Klein controlled the world to give the response. The other Tarot Club members fell silent. They never expected the world to have clues to an angel's blood. What can he accomplish? Audrey, Fours, and company had their impression of Mr. World refreshed again. As for Alger, he suspected that the world would seek Mr. Fool's angel for a drop of blood. After a brief moment of silence, Emlyn, who suddenly realized that his advancement wasn't necessarily as obvious as the other members, weakly said, Are there any clues regarding my previous commission? Fours immediately said, There are suspected cases. I will continue investigating. Burdened with debt, she was motivated to work. At the end of the trading segment, Derek mentioned his request of buying the crystallized roots of the Tree of Elder. As for the feathers of a spirit pack bird, the City of Silver had it in their special warehouse. In addition, he also sought to purchase the golden-edged sunflower and other supplementary ingredients. They were commonly seen items in the outside world, but they were lacking in the forsaken land of God. The crystallized roots of the Tree of Elders and the supplementary ingredients aren't difficult to obtain. Lin's attention was caught as he said, "Then, what can you use in exchange?" Back when he provided Miss Justice with the fruit of the Tree of Elders, he had already learned where the crystallized roots were. Derek thought and said, "A Beyonder characteristic of a Sequence 5 vampire. It was quite a commonly seen monster in the depths of the dark." "Sanguine," Lin said through gritted teeth. "There's no rush. P'll tell you when I've decided what I need." He didn't want an item obtained from a transaction to overlap with the prize of the hunting competition. All right. Having already owed a debt to the world, Derek was relatively at ease. After a moment of silence, Klein rapped the edge of the model table to indicate the commencement of the free exchange. Hero Bandit inside the ancient palace standing above the gray fog. Alger wasn't in a rush to mention the matter regarding crazy Captain Connor's victim. He turned his head to look at the sun. "Are you still in Afternoon Town?" Derek nodded honestly. "Yes, we took a very long time to establish a camp. Later, with small teams, we wiped out the remnant monsters, one street at a time, in search of any ancient ruins that might still exist. Although this process is slow, it's sufficiently safe." His answer was extremely detailed, and it gave the impression that Mr. Hanged Man could ask more questions if he wished to know more. Audrey listened with interest as she raised her hand slightly. "With all of you staying in Afternoon Town for so long, what do you rely on for food? Is there any black-faced grass nearby?" He had long heard from Little Sun that the City of Silver relied on the black-faced grass that they grew around the city as their source of sustenance. "We carried a portion of powdered black-faced grass, but the main source of food comes from hunting those monsters. Once the Beyonder characteristic is expelled, a large proportion of them can be eaten once we skin them and roast them with fire. However, there's a certain degree of corruption in the meat, which will result in psychological problems. We can't continuously consume the meat, and we will need to spread out the intervals," Derek replied in a serious manner to Miss Justice's question. Audrey recalled the few monsters in the depths of the darkness mentioned by Little Sun, and having terrifying vibes about the dark and eerie area around the City of Silver, she couldn't help but press further. "Wouldn't that be very disgusting?" Fours, who was attentively listening to the other members' conversation, was inspired by this question. She deliberately didn't look at Lin as she asked Derek with piqued curiosity, "I remember you mentioning that monsters in the depths of the darkness include vampires. Their bodies run with pus and are extremely ugly. Then how would you consume vampires after killing them?" Lin, who heard the question, forgot to correct her by informing her that sanguine weren't vampires. His expression turned livid as he felt an inexplicable feeling of indescribable horror. Derek was silent for 2 seconds before saying, "There are some monsters that are indeed disgusting, very disgusting. Just like the vampires as mentioned by Miss Magician, but we have no choice. As long as it's edible, we will eat it." His voice gradually turned heavy, as though he once again deeply felt the tragedy that was the curse which enveloped the City of Silver. The palace that looked like a giant's residence fell silent once again. Even Lin, who wanted to retort Derek, didn't say a word. All he did was curl his lips and retract his arm. A few seconds later, the world broke the silence with a chuckle. "Let's return to the sea. There have been certain matters that require your attention." Crazy Captain Connor's Victor's single-eyed skull drifted to a nearby harbor after a storm. The masts were snapped and there were charred marks. The entire crew, including Connor's Victor, died. No one survived. Justice and company didn't know who Crazy Captain was. They weren't too interested in the news, other than being curious as to what caused this destructive naval tragedy. On the other hand, Alger shared completely different thoughts from them. There must be a tremendous secret if the world is paying attention to the matter regarding Crazy Captain. It's no wonder His Eminence, Cotman, issued such an important command to get the mandated Punisher and captains to investigate the situation. Alger's eyes darted about slightly as he said after some thought, "In Bayam, the Church of Storms is actively investigating the people and matters surrounding Crazy Captain Connor's victim." There's no need for me to commission it." Klein chuckled inwardly and got the world to directly ask, "What clues does the Church of Storms possess?" Have no idea. I'll try my best to understand the situation." Alger frankly shook his head. He believed that the world understood what he was implying, that he wasn't exactly sure, but he would sound out what the church knew. Audrey, who was listening out of curiosity, realized that the matter regarding Crazy Captain wasn't simple. Hence she asked probingly, "Mr. World, isn't this common infighting among pirates?" Klein was just about to be perfunctory with Miss Justice, but without divulging anything further when he suddenly thought of a problem. Behind the great smog of Backland and the disappearances, there might be a particular faction from the royal family. It also included some military personnel, and Miss Justice would lean towards the nobles and royal family, both her emotions and from her standpoint. If there comes a day when I target those bastards who are deserving of death, she might not find it acceptable if I commission a mission to her. She might even fall into a dilemma, therefore. I should now inject the impression in her that the royal family and military have plenty of bad guys. I would subtly change the direction in which her standpoint and emotions are directed toward. For this, I can bear the burden that some of the information regarding the world is leaked. Klein thought for a moment, and made the world say with a relaxed, but mocking tone, "Crazy Captain is related to the disappearance of the colonial slaves which Mr. Hanged Man was previously investigating. The demoness sect takes the people who are tricked or abducted and hands them over to Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy, and they have them ship the people over to the northern continent's East Seas coast. Then with Crazy Captain Connors Victor, it completes the last mile. This pirate is intricately tied with many human traffickers and slave merchants in loan. Back when I informed Mr. Hanged Man of the news in January, someone witnessed Balin, who was involved in the disappearance cases, with a MI9 member who is loyal to the royal family. Also, Backland's largest human trafficker, Capim, had guards from the Arbiter pathway. With so many matters compounded together, do you think that Crazy Captain's death is simply a result of pirate infighting? Heh, I've always wondered why the person behind all of this needs so many slaves. The connections between the clues were clearly presented before Audrey, Alger, and company. It made them suddenly realize a lot of things. Mr. World left Backland and headed for the sea to seek out clues. He's always been investigating the truth behind the Great Smog and Prince Edisac's death. According to the information he provided, it's clear that the true murderer hasn't been punished. He's still hidden inside the royal family, and there's a portion of the military who are working for him. How despicable. This kind of person should be thrown into hell. How does Mr. World know that the guards around Capim were Bayunders from the Arbiter pathway? Did he fight with them? Audrey's mind raced as she suddenly made the connection. Capim was killed by hero bandit Black Emperor. The latter clearly knew which pathway Capim's guards belonged to. Hero bandit Black Emperor is Mr. Fool's blessed. Mr. World is suspected to have certain connections with Mr. Fool. He has never sought Emperor Rosel's diary page. Therefore, Mr. World is hero bandit Black Emperor, and he's also Mr. Fool's blessed. He doesn't hand in Emperor Rosel's diary pages because he hands them over in private. Some of his actions from before were to hide his identity as a blessed. This is a test given to him by Mr. Fool. It's really hard to connect Mr. World with hero bandit Black Emperor. The latter feels like a hero. Audrey felt like she had stumbled upon the truth as she began to wonder what kind of person Mr. World, who was also hero bandit Black Emperor, was actually like in real life. Alger and Catlia instantly understood why Jayaman Sparrow had attacked Tracy. This blessed was seeking out the truth behind the great smog of Backland. And the truth hidden behind this was something Mr. Fool was interested in. Fours and Lin, who lived in Backland, also vaguely sensed something when the world mentioned Capim. After all, hero bandit Black Emperor's legend was rather striking in the recent half a year. He became an important character in many run-of-the-mill novels. Even Fours herself had thought of making him the protagonist in a love story between a hero bandit and a young royal lady. They finally understood why the world had noticed in time that something was brewing in Backland and that a tragedy was about to happen. This was because this gentleman had been tracking the corresponding clues the entire time. From the looks of it, the matter in Backland is far from over. There will likely be another accident in the future. I really wish to flee from this place immediately, but Zio definitely wouldn't want to. I have no way of explaining this to her, for suddenly had thoughts of fleeing Backland. Lin wasn't too afraid. From his point of view, the Sanguine's important figures were in Backland, and were definitely able to provide some protection if a disaster really happened. After 2 seconds of silence, Alger said in a serious manner, "I will try my best to investigate this matter." He had already sensed that the truth behind Crazy Captain's death hid a rather terrifying storm. As such, he was a little apprehensive and afraid, but he also trembled with excitement that he was involved in the most important matter regarding the southern and northern continents. After Katlia heard that, she nodded. T will also seek out relevant information. TF, there are more clues provided. Perhaps I might be able to help. Klein thought for a moment before letting the world speak frankly. On the night of Crazy Captain's death, a high-sequence Beyonder suspected to be from the Black Emperor pathway appeared on his ship. However, this demigod managed to escape before John Cotman arrived. Black Emperor pathway, demigod, Alger and Katlia ruminated over these phrases as they considered an angle of attack. Audrey and company were astonished that the Tarot Club had discussed the development of demigods to something directly involving demigods. The cases that they were involved in were really increasing in level. As for Derek, he didn't understand a thing. With Crazy Captain's matter coming to pass, Katlia glanced at the world before deliberately mentioning her tidbit. Another incident happened at sea. Last week, the crazy adventurer Jayaman Sparrow hunted the second mate of the King of Immortality, Slaughterer Kerchit. He was a Sequence 5 Beyonder. How impressive! Fours, who was only a Sequence 8, sighed from the bottom of her heart. She knew very well what it meant to be a Sequence 5. Yes, he really is a legendary adventurer, Audrey echoed. Emlyn turned agape before he closed his mouth. He felt that he was still a distance away from that level. Alger said without any signs of unrest. It's because of this that the investigation of Jayaman Sparrow's origin has become an important mission of the various major organizations. Are you implying that the Church of Storms has gotten you to investigate me? Klein instantly read in between the lines as he made the world chuckle. Wonder where I can claim this commission. I wish to use some unimportant information in exchange for money. I have some understanding of Jayaman Sparrow. Oh, Mr. World is hinting that he doesn't mind me exchanging what appears to be important but, in reality, is actually meaningless information regarding Jayaman Sparrow in exchange for rewards and trust. The hanged man nodded in enlightenment. The free exchange continued for a while, until Derek finished learning this week's list of ancient Hermes terms before everything came to a close. After he watched the bowing Miss Justice and company leave, Klein cast his gaze onto Grossel's travels.